You always know what to do. When someone is falling apart, you know exactly what to say. When something breaks, your mind is already 3 steps into the solution. People call you reliable, they call you calm, they call you the person who has it together. And somewhere inside, quietly, privately, you are exhausted in a way you can't quite explain. Because here's the question no one ever asks the fixer. Who fixes you? You learned something early. Not from a textbook, not from a course. You learned it from your environment, from watching what happened when things went wrong and no one stepped in. So you stepped in. You became the one who reads the room before walking into it, who senses tension before anyone says a word, who starts problem solving while everyone else is still processing. In relationships, this shows up as being the steady one, the one who doesn't burden people, the one who listens more than they speak. In work, it looks like competence. But under that competence is something quieter, a belief, usually unconscious, that your value is conditional, that you are most lovable when you are most useful. Psychologists call this a pattern connected to anxious attachment, combined with what's known as hyperactivated self-sufficiency, a mode where the nervous system treats asking for help as a threat, not a weakness, not a choice, a learned survival strategy. And survival strategies don't disappear just because you grow up. They become part of how you move through the world. Here is what this pattern actually means about you. It means you were perceptive enough to notice what others missed, adaptable enough to fill a gap that shouldn't have been yours to fill, resilient enough to keep functioning when things were uncertain. That is not a disorder. That is intelligence responding to an environment. The problem isn't that you became a fixer. The problem is that the world kept rewarding you for it, and never once asked if it was costing you something. So the identity solidified. I am the one who holds things together. And identities, once formed, are very hard to question, because questioning them can feel like losing yourself entirely. Here's what's happening in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning and regulation, learn to activate very quickly in uncertain or emotionally charged situations. Think of it like this. Most people have a smoke detector that goes off when there's a fire. Yours was calibrated in an environment where fires happened often, so now it goes off at the smell of smoke. Sometimes even before the smoke arrives. This is called threat anticipation bias, a state where the brain has been trained to scan for problems and mobilize resources before they are needed. Here's a simple way to see it. Imagine a thermostat. Most people's emotional thermostat responds to current temperature. Yours responds to predicted temperature. This makes you extraordinarily effective, but it also means you are rarely fully at rest. Even in calm environments, your system is running, scanning, preparing, solving. That background noise and that low hum of readiness is why you feel tired in ways sleep doesn't fix. There's one more layer. When you help someone and it works, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurochemical involved in any rewarding behavior. Over time, your brain begins to associate solving with safety, and not solving, standing still, letting things be, with discomfort, even anxiety. You don't just help because you care. You help because somewhere in your nervous system, helping feels like the only way to feel okay. So what do you do with this? Not how do you stop being a fixer, but how do you be a fixer without disappearing in the process? The first step is to name the pattern without judgment. The brain cannot regulate what it cannot recognize. This is grounded in metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking from a small distance. When you notice yourself rushing to solve, pause and ask, am I fixing because it helps them, or because discomfort is uncomfortable? For me, here's a real example. A friend calls you upset. Before you offer solutions, try sitting with them for 60 seconds. Just listening, not fixing. Notice what that feels like in your body. That discomfort is information. The second step is to practice receiving without deflecting. Fixers are often terrible at accepting help, not because they're ungrateful, but because receiving requires vulnerability. And vulnerability triggers the same threat response the brain learned long ago. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's work shows that social connection activates the same reward circuits as physical safety. When you block connection by always being the giver, you are literally depriving your brain of something it needs. So the next time someone offers to help you, even with something small, say yes. Without immediately offering something in return, sit with the mild discomfort of being cared for. That discomfort is the healing. The third step is to distinguish between responding and reacting. Fixers often confuse these two. A reaction is immediate, automatic, driven by the nervous system. A response is chosen, deliberate, grounded in what's actually needed. Psychologist Viktor Frankl described the space between stimulus and response as the seat of human freedom. Next time something goes wrong at work or home, wait 10 minutes before you do anything. Let others have the chance to step in. You will likely find that more gets resolved than you expected, and your absence from the solution doesn't mean failure. The fourth step is to redefine what strength actually looks like. There is a difference between being strong and performing. Strength for others' comfort. Genuine psychological resilience, as defined in the research of Susan Kabasa, includes commitment, control, and challenge, but not the absence of struggle. Tell one person, just one, about something you're finding hard, not to get advice, just to be known. Notice whether the world ends. It won't. The fifth step is to build a life that doesn't require your constant management. If every area of your life depends on your direct involvement to function, you haven't built a life. You've built a system with a single point of failure. If people only bring you problems when you solve them instantly, you've trained them to need you in a very specific way. Try letting a non-critical problem sit for 24 hours without intervening. Observe what happens. You may discover that others are more capable than your nervous system assumed. Here's the model to hold on to. The fixer is not broken. The fixer is over-deployed. Like a muscle trained to never fully rest. You've been doing extraordinary work in conditions that never asked if you were okay. The path forward isn't to stop caring. It's to expand your identity beyond what you can solve. To be someone who is valued for existing, not just for the crises you prevent. You have spent so much of your life being the answer. Maybe no one taught you that you were also allowed to be the question, that you were allowed to not know, to need, to rest without guilt, to sit in a room and simply be present, not scanning for what's broken. The most profound thing the brain can learn is that it is safe to stop preparing, that the world will continue even when you are not holding it together. You were never supposed to carry all of this alone. You just got very, very good at it.